Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so this is going back to what we discussed on Monday. I had a couple requests for the lecture again, and unfortunately, the time spent in class was just too long for it to work on YouTube. So I'm just going through and doing this again. So please remember, membranes, they help organize chemical reactions. All of these reactions are happening randomly, as in it just molecules are diffusing across a membrane. They're happenstance running into things. So basically, membranes sort of provide the area to keep them so they're more likely to run into each other. It's like mixing in a bowl. Membranes are selectively permeable, okay? Permeable meaning things can go in and out, selective meaning that only certain substances can go in and out, okay? They're the gatekeeper, okay? They're the bouncer. You guys have heard many various analogies over the years as to what the cell membrane actually is for the cell, but it essentially is the gatekeeper to the cell. And they can hold teams of enzymes that function in metabolism. So for example, in the lysosome, that often holds digestive enzymes and things like that in the cell, the lysosome's membrane helps hold those things in place. Structure is a phospholipid bilayer, okay? So we have two layers of phospholipids, and then we also have various proteins and cholesterol. Cholesterol is important for maintaining fluidity, and then proteins can act as transport receptors or enzymes. In water, phospholipids form a stable bilayer. This happens spontaneously, okay? Our heads, which is the phosphate group, are hydrophilic, which means they'll go on the outside, where our fatty acid chains line up on the inside because they are hydrophobic. As crass as it is, it sort of looks like a two-tailed sperm, and that works really well for people. So this is just a pretty picture of the various things that you can have. We have proteins that go, the integral protein is one that goes all the way across. A peripheral protein is one that really is only on one side of it. We have our cytoplasm, we have the extracellular matrix. It's just, like I said, it's a nice picture. So our cell membrane is a fluid mosaic model. Mosaic meaning it's composed of a whole bunch of different things. It's phospholipids, cholesterols, proteins, and they are not stuck in one place. They actually float within the bilayer. Okay, so it is fluid. And that's what that means. The molecules that make up the phospholipid bilayer don't necessarily move in and out of the cell, but they can move laterally across the cell. Okay, cholesterol and proteins are embedded in it, and carbohydrates act as cell identification tags. This is part of how our body knows what self is versus what something foreign is. Because they have both polar and nonpolar regions in the phospholipid bilayer, okay, the membrane allows certain materials in and out of the cell. It permits exchange of nutrients. Some substances cross very easily. Luckily, with the way it works out, carbon dioxide, water, and oxygen all pass in and out through the membrane very, very easily. We don't need to put a lot of extra effort into it. Some hydrocarbons also can. Now, when we're talking about transport, passive transport means that we do not put energy into it. That's why we call it passive. Diffusion is random movement of particles across the membrane. The movement is due to the concentration gradient. We always go from high to low. Skiing, you go from high to low. Typically, you fall down the stairs. I might be adept at falling up them, but most people fall down. We go against the concentration gradient. We float down the river. We don't have to use energy. The movement continues until equilibrium is reached. I'd like to point out movement still continues, but it is then an equal movement, okay? If one molecule goes in, another molecule comes out. It's not this sort of rush that occurs if there's a really big concentration gradient. Substances will diffuse from where it's more concentrated to less, and only my small uncharged particles can diffuse without any sort of assistance, okay? Go. Osmosis, water's so stinking important, it gets its own thing. Osmosis is simply the diffusion of water. Again, it goes down its concentration gradient. It does not use energy, and we'll hit this whole hypotonic solution thing. So hypertonic, the solution contains more solute than the solution is compared with. Solute is what is dissolved in it. So we're going to go with salt water. Okay, so if I have a cup of water from the ocean and I have a cup of water from Cuba Lake, The salt concentration is higher, obviously, in the ocean water, which means that it is hypertonic to the other. Hypotonic solution contains less solute. My lake water would be hypotonic as compared to my as compared to my ocean water. Isotonic, iso means same. Okay, so we went through all of these 10% and 10%. It's isotonic both in and out of the cell. The water moves in and out at the same rate. If I have 10% outside and 20% inside of the cell is hypertonic. It's a higher concentration. Outside of the cell is hypotonic compared to inside of the cell, and the water is going to move into the cell. Okay. 30% outside, 10% inside. And now I'm looking at a hypotonic solution inside of the cell as compared to a hypertonic, and the water will now move out of the cell. Okay. This is just another pretty picture. And remember that the reason that this water level is higher is because this membrane, whatever this purple substance is, cannot go through the membrane, so the water travels through it. So this is actually an example of osmosis. Okay. Water balance between cells and the surroundings is crucial, and it is known as osmoregulation. So osmo means water, hence osmosis. Okay, and then regulation means, regulation. A couple of things here. Isotonic, all our cells are happy. Hypotonic causes animal cells to blow up. It causes turgidity in plant cells. It really pushes against the cell wall. Mrs. Tompkins taught you that hypotonic causes things to swell that looks like an O, and hypertonic causes things to shrivel, and it looks like a lowercase e. Okay, if we put an animal cell and it shrivels up, it does the same thing in a plant cell. The cell wall doesn't shrivel as much as your just cell membrane does, but this will cause a plant to wilt. And I'm going to stop here and continue the next recording in a moment.